going on, everybody? Welcome back to the 31 Days of Horror. I am your host, Mood616, and thank you once again for stopping in, guys. Yes, 31 Days of Horror, Volume 9, Day 11. Of course, it's coming at you live and direct. Alright, guys, so we're going to take it back to the US, and so the reason why I'm doing this film today, and I'm basically doing it for three different reasons. I needed to do a 2025 film. This is marked as 2023, but it just officially got released this year. Widely released, and I love cannibal films, hence the Cannibal Holocaust shirt. And I love watching, like, the majority of YouTube videos I watch are actually like not mukbang videos. I like to watch like food reviews and like competitive eating videos and stuff like that. So kind of mash all that together, and this was the perfect candidate. Now, I generally don't like to blind buy brand new films. I like to see them first and then, you know, kind of pick and choose the ones I want to buy and stuff like that. But again, I needed a 2025 film. I've seen most of the majority of the popular stuff this year, and I was like, well, I kind of wanted to do something a little under the radar, a little bit more indie as I usually do. So everything kind of ticking off every box there. Of course, we're talking about Cannibal Mukbang. Yes, the title of the film is Cannibal Mukbang. Now, if you don't know what mukbang means, I think it's a term that was coined in like South Korea. And it's basically just people that would eat on camera. Sometimes they talk and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's ASMR type videos and stuff like that. It's a really weird concept that kind of really blew the fuck up. It's very huge all over the world. People and these influencers make tons and tons of money and stuff. It's not really my thing. I don't really like to watch people just straight up eat and not talk. And the whole ASMR thing is really kind of strange to me, but anyways, I digress. So get into the synopsis of Cannibal Mukbang. Basically, this one follows our two main characters, Mark and Ash. They run into each other at an all-night convenience store. It's about 2 a.m. and stuff like that. And Mark kind of like sees something in Ash. He thinks that she's a little bit quirky. They share the same love of chips and stuff like that. Anyways, so one thing leads to another. Mark's leaving. Anyways, he gets hit by a car and he wakes up in Ash's apartment. Now, of course, the right thing to do would be, you know, call an ambulance if you accidentally hit him, you know, but of course, this is a movie and it doesn't go that way. Anyways, he wakes up in her apartment and stuff like that, and they kind of start hitting it off. Like, she's taking care of him because he's got a bump on his head, and his head really does hurt because, you know, he explains when he was younger, he had lost his parents in a car accident. He's got a plate in his head and stuff like that. And so anyways, they start talking and stuff, and they learn that they're both kind of foodies. Of course, she is the mukbanger influencer, and he works for, like, he does customer service for an online food retailer that, you know, sends out food to people and stuff like that, does customer service work. So they're like both into food and shit like that. Anyways, he ends up leaving the apartment, and he's just like, he totally is infatuated with Ash. And, but he doesn't want to call her. He talks to his brother, and he's like, I just want her to call me, blah, blah, blah. So he goes on with his life, goes on a date and stuff like that. And, you know, of course, that's not going so well. And she ends up messaging him. So he meets up with her and stuff like that. They go on this date. And, of course, you know, the whole time, like, she is very kind of quirky and different and stuff like that. Like, she does, you know, weird influencer mukbang. He doesn't really understand the whole process and things like that. Anyways, they're out on a date one day, and he takes her to this weird vegan restaurant, which I thought was such an odd choice considering, like, she eats a lot of meat on cameras and they're going to, like, a vegan restaurant. I thought it was kind of strange. But anyways, he's sitting there with her. Anyways, this dude walks into the restaurant, and she's like, get the fuck out of here, get the fuck out of here. So he's like, what the fuck? So as he's leaving, he sees the guy sit down with her, and they're like all laughing and shit like that. So he gets all distraught because, like, again, he just kind of fell in love with this girl. He goes into this field, starts drinking, passes out. He wakes up to them in the field, and he's beating the shit out of her. One thing leads to another, and dude ends up dead. And of course, that is your kind of synopsis of the film, and then it goes from there. So my thoughts on Cannibal Mukbang. Now, this is it's more or less a romance like a romantic horror film, but it's not like one of those really cheesy. It's dubbed as a comedy horror film. I wouldn't so much say it's comedy. It's definitely more on the horror elements. It does have the romance angle, of course, with Mark and Ash and stuff like that, but it's kind of like a tragic story. It's not like Romeo and Juliet, but it is kind of like a tragic love story and stuff like that. But the thing I really enjoyed about Cannibal Mukbang is that, you know, it is a commentary on, you know, the ridiculousness of, like, mukbangs and, like, influencers and stuff like that. And, you know, it's a commentary on, you know, dealing with tragedy in your lives and stuff like that. with mental illness. There's a lot of commentaries that are happening here. It definitely wears the commentaries and you know, those type of concepts on its sleeve. But the thing I like about it though, it doesn't really try to like keep stuffing it down your throat and shit like that. I knew this thing was going to start playing because for some odd reason, this is done by Well Go USA, and yeah, it's a burnt disc, which is so strange. I'll get into that in a minute. But I didn't want it to play because sometimes I get flagged when the movies start playing. I don't want that. But anyways, yeah, so it wears, you know, all these commentaries and these general ideas and stuff like that. It doesn't constantly shove it down your throat. I think the way it showcases its commentaries and its different type of narratives and stuff like that is quite elegant. I think it's really good. And the romantic relationship between Ash and Mark in this film is very unique because it's built on their pasts in a sense, and I really like the way they kind of showcase Mark as this tragic character through the film. Like, he lost his parents in this accident, he's been dealing with it his entire life, he's got this like plate in his head, and every once in a while like he has these video conferences with his doctor, like a psychologist and stuff like that. And at one point in the film he even jokes about like, how do you deal with the loss of your parents, and he's like, you know, just a lot of fucking booze and movies and stuff like that. But they kind of break up the whole love story and everything that's happening within this film with reminding you a little bit of like, you know, what it's really all about. And I think it's done very elegantly and stuff like that. But yeah, so of course you have the romantic angle to the film, and then of course something happens about 40 minutes in the film, and then the whole movie kind of changes itself. While this thing was playing out, like, I was thinking it's gonna go one way. It kind of does, but it really doesn't. So it's not as predictable as you might think it would be in a romantic relationship. Is she just gonna, you know, end up killing him and eating him kind of thing or stuff like that? It's not really. There's actually a tragic backstory to her, and the reasoning for why a lot of the stuff is happening in the film is because of her past also. And I like that kind of concept, you know, that both of them are dealing with past tragedies and stuff like that. And I think it's really well done. Now, when I first popped this film in, I was like, oh shit, it's put out by Well Go USA. I was kind of taken back by the fact that this was a BDR, because if you know Well Go USA, they actually put out a lot of Asian stuff. They usually put out, you know, Asian horror films, a lot of action, a lot of kung fu films, a lot of Asian. It's more of an Asian line. So it kind of took me back that this was a Well Go USA release, and it was a fucking BDR, which they don't put out BDR. So everything about this was totally bizarre to me. But I think they have put out some US stuff. But yeah, so Cannibal Mukbang, man. Getting into like the whole kind of specs of the film and stuff like that, the acting's really good. I think Mark as a character, he's a very tragic character and stuff. The way he plays this role, he's kind of like, it almost like he's slow, but he's not. Like, he's actually a really smart guy. He writes reviews for like horror films and stuff like that, and he just has all these tragic kind of elements in his life and stuff like that. He's got this very misogynistic brother and stuff that he deals with, and he's completely the polar opposite and stuff. But the way he plays this character throughout the film, I think, is really good, because on the polar side, Ash is like this very kind of quirky, like kind of upbeat, you know, just doing crazy shit type person. So it's like yin and yang. It's like opposites attract kind of thing. And I can see how it really does work. Yeah, so the one thing about this film that kind of took me back a little bit when I looked at it was the runtime. It ran like 104 minutes. I was like, holy shit, dude. Like, this is probably going to be way too long, because it is a lower budget indie type film, right? And usually when you see longer run times, it means they just couldn't figure out what to cut. And a lot of filmmakers are like, well, I shot that, I'm gonna fucking use it in my film. And I kind of felt that's what it was gonna be. But even though there's a lot of shit that's going on here, like I said, the backstory with Ash, you know, all the stuff, all the tragic stuff with Mark, and you know, there's a brother character, and there's not really a lot of characters in this, but I think everything is really well done. Even like these kind of weird nightmare scenes, and there's a full-on backstory with Ash and stuff, and everything kind of plays itself really well. I wasn't checking the time at all while I was watching this. There was really no downtime. I was intrigued through the whole thing. I was just kind of taken back by how the narrative was a little bit more complex than I was expecting. I was literally expecting someone to be killing people and just eating them for the sake of being insane. And that's not really what I got here. I got a little bit more, like I said, there's a little bit more commentary and subject matter that's actually really going on in this one. So, but all in all, it's shot good. It sounds good. I really like the synth score that's in it. You know, it's a very common thing to do now. But I mean, if your movie has a synth score, I'm probably going to mention it. So, you know, that looks really good or sounds really good and looks really good for what it is. So this one is actually directed by Amy Kunge. Now, I'm not sure how I pronounce the last name exactly, but it's like Kuge. Amy Kunge. I think she's Japanese. Anyways, she actually produced Black Eyed Susan from last year, which was one of my favorite movies of last year. Now, if you've seen that movie, you kind of know what to expect with this one, because that one's got a really fucked up idea and it's executed in probably the most fucked up way. It's crazy. Check out Black Eyed Susan if you haven't. But this is her directorial debut. So when I learned that, when I first got this, I started like looking it up and stuff like that. And I was surprised to see there was actually favorable reviews and stuff, but I didn't really look too much. I don't read people's reviews. So I was kind of taken back by that. And I was like, wow, this should be really interesting because I love that movie so much. And I'm like, what does she have in store for us with this one? Sorry, this is really irritating. This doesn't want to go, does it? So with that, and I was like, okay. And yeah, this one's pretty fucked up. Again, all practical effects. It's got a lot of blood and gore. It's more of a horror film than comedy, like I said before. Don't expect, if you read IMDb, it says comedy first. It's not really a comedy. There's quirky parts, but it's not punchline. It's not stupid, physical comedy. It has none of that shit in this movie. It's just got really kind of, kind of suspend your belief moments. I think that could be a little bit funny, but it's not a comedy. It's a romantic horror film that I think works on all levels. So, but yeah, big up to Amy Coonan. I would really like to see what she does next, because I wasn't overly familiar with the other stuff that she produced, but Black Eyed Susan was one of my favorites, like I said. And then her doing this as your debut is really well done. Really, really well done. I was kind of taken back by this whole thing. Like I said, I was expecting this one to be just kind of straight up low budget indie trash, Cannibal Mukbang. There's so many of these fucking stupid titled movies that are just meant to be kind of like mockbusters and mockumentaries, and they're just stupid CG fucking bullshit. Like we all know that with shark movies. Every time there's a blockbuster, there's like 10,000 other movies that come out. But I mean, most people read the title Cannibal Mukbang, probably won't click on the video because they're thinking it's garbage. I think it's pretty good. And for anybody that knows me, I'm not into romance. I always mention on my podcast, I don't even like love. I love my wife, but I'm not a big fan of anything to do with like love and stuff like that. And I mean, I guess it's probably because of my background, because I didn't grow up in a very loving house. But it probably has something to do with it. I can kind of relate to these characters a little bit, like the tragedy and, just not having that bond and, not having that structure growing up. So everything here kind of worked for me. A lot better than I anticipated it to be. I'm going to give this one 8 out of 10, actually. It's actually pretty fucking solid. Yeah, good stuff, man. I was, really taken back. And I'm just so glad it was all practical effects, because I think something like this, if you had to start CG and shit, it would have been just like horrible. But definitely a lot more horror elements than I was expecting. So that's always a fucking good thing. So check out Cannibal Mukbang. I know it sounds stupid, but I mean, if you're into like, I kind of consider myself to be a little bit of a foodie, but I don't watch mukbang videos, but I do watch a lot of, restaurant challenges, home challenges, stuff like that. Like everybody, if you watch this shit, I watch Randy Santel, Beard Meets Food, Dan Killer Kennedy, Scott Eats, Joel Hansen, Molly Schuyler, I should say. I mean, the list goes on. Jeff Esper. There's so many good eaters out there, and it's just amazing what they do. But anyways, I digress. Cannibal Mukbang. Fun film. Actually really fun. I mean, I wouldn't say it's overly fun. It's a good movie. It's kind of depressing. It's a tragic, depressing film that ultimately is pretty good. So anyways, I feel like I went on way too long on that one. I was planning on keeping this one a little bit brief and stuff like that. But if you like what you hear, definitely check it out. I wouldn't recommend paying the price. This was a lot more expensive. Oh yeah, that was the other thing I want to mention. Well Go USA, like I said, they always press up their disc, but this was more expensive than even their press disc. I couldn't believe it was a BDR. I don't know when they started doing that, so just be aware that it is a BDR if you're going to check it out, okay? So I don't really personally care. I know there's a lot of people out there that actually give a fuck if their discs are pressed or not. I mean, I prefer a pressed disc, but if that's the way it comes, it is what it is. I feel like you do get a little bit cheated if you're paying more, which I guess is burn on demand. I don't know, but they don't tell you that, so it is what it is. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it here for day 11, 31 Days of Horror Volume 9. And as per usual, deuces!